everybody. Okay, I think everything is good here on this end. So I think we're ready to start. So thanks so much for being here tonight for our beginner-based live stream. We are going to be working on this cute little picture of an owl sitting on a pumpkin. This was one of our options that we kind of voted on Mighty Networks the last time that we had a vote. So we voted for this one, the squirrel project. So this is our Friday night live stream that we're working on now. As you can see, it's definitely a little bit more advanced. And anyway, this was another runner-up, and so I was kind of short on time, so we just went ahead and decided to go with the owl on a pumpkin. So very excited to see this project. And I'm going to zip up back to the top and say hi to Barbara. Hi, Mina. Hi, Estella. Hi, Cynthia. Hi, Night Owl. Hi, Kendall. Hi, Lisa. Let's see. Hi, Desiree. Hi, Michelle. Oh, Cynthia, I hope your head feels better soon. Headaches are no fun. Hi, Rhonda. Hi, Brian. Welcome. Glad that you can be here tonight. Hi, Laura. Hi, Steve. We are well, thanks, and I hope you are too. Hi, June. Fantastic. Okay, well, we're just going to jump right in here. I have my ducks in a row tonight, as last Friday I did not. But we just do what we can. So I was very short on time last Friday and then got compounded with camera troubles. So I was a little bit late, and I apologize for that. And I am on time tonight, and I have the burners going, and we are ready to get started. So for this project, because we are focused more on a beginner-based style, I will be using more outline kind of techniques. I have right now 3 burners going, and I'll be starting with the flow point. And if you have a wire tip burner, you can find something like just a ball point would work fine for this. And then we'll kind of block in some of our big chunky lines, like around our pumpkin and our owl, with that flow point. And then we can come back in and start defining a few of the other more noticeable areas with the mini flow point. And again, if you're using a wire tip burner, they have a similar smaller ball point that you can use for that as well. And then once we get our outlining kind of blocked in, we'll go in and we'll add a little bit of shading. So I'll probably be working with the shading point on that one. And if you are working with a wire tip burner, there's a variety of different ones that you can use, including, what do we have here? Yeah, we have some medium shaders, some small shaders. There's kind of a knife shader. And my dog needs in, so give me just 1 minute to let her in really quick. Can't be outdoors. Come on. Alrighty. My apologies for that. But we live in the mountains and there's critters outside other than our lovely Sophie dog. So we need to make sure she gets in safe and sound. So yeah, that's kind of my plan moving forward with the project. So we'll go ahead and I'm trying to see where I can probably scooch over and get me out of the way. There we go. All right, so when we're talking about just beginner basics, we want to focus more on beginners like to you know, do a lot of line work, and that's totally fine. What you want to avoid when you're doing line work is doing an entire project with the same kind of thickness of line. We want to vary up those thicknesses of lines, and that will help just give it a little bit more of an interesting texture and appearance. So even though we're doing more simple techniques here, we can still kind of combine and vary them so it makes it a little bit more interesting. I like his fluffy little ear tufts, so I don't think I want to do a heavy line around those. Let's go ahead and start with some of the main kind of areas of Mr. Owl. Now in this case I'm pulling the point down, but you can either pull the point down or push the point up, whatever kind of works best for you. So I'm going to selectively choose some of my thicker lines here. I'm trying to move nice and slow and gentle. If you linger in an area too much, you're going to get a little bit more of that, kind of ghosting and overburn. Which isn't, you know, the end of the world. Hi, please don't jump on my table, kitty. Come on, scoot, scoot. You're going to get burned if you jump up there. Okay, so June, this is a flow point that comes with the Walnut Hollow Creative Versa tool. This tool is no longer in production, but you still can get some of these in inventory. They're a very standardized kind of a soldering iron solid point type burner, so you can get other brands that have this type of point. If you're using a wire tip tool, you can get something like this where the pen plugs into the wire, and it will create a very similar kind of line. Hi, Terry. All right, so we will continue on here with our gentle line. I don't want to press down really hard, but that's just my style. Some people really like a very textured, heavy kind of look to their wood burnings, and that's totally fine. I try to go a little bit more realistic and don't go really heavy on the pressure. Even with something like this that's more, a little bit more simplified, I still like to keep a light pressure. Sometimes when you really press down hard, the wood grain itself can kind of influence the direction of the tool, and your lines can be a little bit more uneven. Careful, kitty. And to get these curves, sometimes it helps to turn the wood, and that can help as well. Otherwise, just do the best that you can here. Oh, kind of holding my breath here to keep from making uneven lines. Okay. Oh, I forgot this part down here. Didn't even transfer that on. Okay, so there I have some thicker lines. Another thing that we can do while we have this point is block in the eyes. This is a good, quick, easy point to use to block in an area that's really dark. Terry, you were holding your breath too? Yeah. That is always helpful. Because this guy is kind of chunky. If you're not sure where you are on your line, just kind of doodle with this point and learn kind of where it is and how it handles and all that. I think I want to make the stem a little bolder and bring that up and over. Now we'll try to get in a nice tight little area with that nose. Wink. And then we'll block in some of these larger areas down here as well. Mina says, to our Bear Den members, that's our paid platform over on Mighty Networks. We have a wonderful community there. The member gallery, Mina says, has been updated with new artwork from Rick. Awesome. So go check it out. Thank you for that reminder. That's awesome. So everybody has their own little members gallery on our network to kind of showcase your artwork. And let's see, I'm going to come this way. Oh, and Mina has the link there. Cool. Thank you, Mina. Okay, so we just kind of have these areas roughed in for now. Behave, cord. Now, this point is also very good at blocking in the dark areas, so we'll just go ahead and do that really quick. A lot of times I like to work from the darks to the lights. So I'm going to take a look at this picture and see where the darkest areas are, and I'm going to focus on those first. I like to establish like a really true dark in each piece, because I think it kind of sets the foundation for the rest of the art. The really dark values are kind of like the foundation of a building, and then everything builds up off of that. Lisa says, all you see at this point are coloring book outlines, but you know from experience that when you get into it, this will transform. Oh, gotcha. And if you didn't know how she used a flow point, you wouldn't know it. Well, thanks. Yeah, I like to take beginners by the hand with just the line work, and then we kind of evolve and take it a little one step further and one step further to develop it into a little bit more of a realistic or semi-realistic. It doesn't have to be realistic. I guess it has more interesting shading and elements to it that takes it from the beginner area to maybe a little bit more intermediate. And that is the goal of these videos, is to try to take you by the hand from more of the simplicity to a little more fun. It's all fun. Night Owl is asking, what is the purpose behind using the bold flow point lines? Because I think it's fun and different. That's pretty much where I'm at right now, is just to give it a little bit more uniqueness, because as beginners a lot of times we like to outline, but I want to show how you can take outlines and then use them to your advantage for a more dynamic picture. So I'm selectively adding in some bolder, heavier lines, and then I'll go back here in a minute and we'll add some lighter lines. I guess you could say some more lightweight lines. They're not quite as bold. And just kind of thinking about where else I want to add some of these darker lines, maybe in the undercarriage area and under here. I like to vary the line thickness with beginner-based pieces. I just like how it looks, and I think it's kind of fun. So, all right, that's all I'm going to do, I think, with the flow point. Next, we're going to switch over to the mini flow point. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn this off in case I want to switch out a new point later. And another thing with beginner-based tutorials like this is to kind of play around with the different points and see, okay, well, I love this point. This one's kind of difficult to use, and maybe this one's okay, but I want you guys to play around with the different points to get a feeling of what you guys like the most and what you're most comfortable with, if that makes sense. Cool. Okay, I don't need that. We are switching over to the mini flow point. So the mini flow point is just going to have a thinner line. So I still want to stick with a beginner-based mindset and do some outlining here. But if I went through and I outlined every single thing that I transferred on in this picture with that flow point, it's going to look kind of unbalanced. It's going to look too chunky, or as Lisa said, kind of like a coloring book outline. So I want to vary my line thicknesses, and still all I'm doing is going right over my guidelines, but I am slightly altering the thickness of the line. So as a beginner, if you're looking for something kind of new and different to try, or even as a more advanced artist and you just want something fun, I love these projects because they are simple and fun. They come together quite easily, and you just kind of play around with the different tips and techniques and see what you like. And I'll just do my best to tie in these thicker lines with the thinner lines, maybe a little bit of a transition in there. And let's see, we'll come down and add some more of the line work on the feet. Not sure. I think I will go ahead and enclose those claws right now. All right, so already we're starting to get a little bit more of a dynamic picture, and all we're doing is adjusting the thickness of our lines. Again, holding the breath is optional, but it definitely helps me so I don't make as many mistakes. Okay, and then let's see, we have a little bit of a shadowy thing there and some lines for our pumpkin stem. All right, let's see what else we have for Mr. Owl. Mina, that's right where I'm headed right now. You say that, yeah, you noticed that I didn't start with the eyes. Well, for this beginner project, I want to kind of focus maybe more on the outer edges, which beginners tend to see more as the outer outlines, and then maybe work their way in. So for this one, I am just about to start on those eyes to, yeah, hello. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, kind of jump around here a little bit. And maybe I will leave the eyes for a little bit later. Let's see, I'm just thinking of some other areas that I really want to put in some of these more intricate line work details. I'm not very happy with my lighting tonight. I keep trying to change it up for you. Trying to find the best way. But yeah, Mina is correct. Generally, I like to start with the eyes. Whenever I'm dealing with anything that has eyes, I usually start with the eyes first and then kind of make sure that they are set and then move on beyond that. That way, if my eyes don't turn out quite right, then I can start over and I don't have as much time involved. These eyes, I think, are pretty straightforward and simple, so I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to take good care of those here in just a bit. But if you're unsure on eyes, definitely go ahead and start with those first. Make sure that you get those the way you want them before you move on to the rest of the picture. Because if the eyes aren't right, you know, that's what people are going to notice first, is the eyes. Alrighty. Let's see, then we can go ahead and add in a little bit more of the wing structure. So right now, all I'm doing is tracing over the guidelines that I've already established. I'm just varying those line widths a bit. So we have little U's and V's in here to create the illusion of overlapping feathers. Lisa says you really love using the mini flow point. It's the best tip you found that mimics a pen or a pencil. Yes, I agree. It's very simplified. It's easy to use. It goes really smoothly across the wood. It doesn't dig in like some of the other points, which is also very nice. Hello. Whoa, that one kind of got crazy. So at this point, you know, I think that most any beginner can do what we've already done. Just follow your pattern, transfer on these lines, and alter your line thickness a little bit. Very cool, Night Owl. I like that you're using the patterns from Wood Burning University. That's awesome. All right, here across the chest of the owl, I think I'm going to do that with an even kind of softer point here after a bit. So we'll just kind of keep going with our main lines. And anything that's softer, I will wait and do that with a different point. Awesome. Thanks, Mina. She says, if you're not a member of our paid platform on Mighty Networks, you can also find this pattern available for purchase at Wood Burning University. So if you just want to jump right in and create your own pattern, you can do that as well. But if you join our paid platform, then you get the project patterns that we're working on. You get those included with your tiered membership. So since this is a beginner pattern, everybody on the platform gets it. Barbara, yes, burning the lines is absolutely, it's this great place to start for beginners. Line work is one of the core kind of foundations of wood burning. You gotta get your line work down, and that just makes you more comfortable with the pen or the tool, whatever you want to call it. It gives you, improves your dexterity and all that, and just kind of gets you more comfortable with how to handle it. And you will notice that I do use this little pad. It's a little thing you're supposed to put your hand on for using a mouse on a keyboard and a computer, and I just fold it up because this solid point burner is a long way from the surface of the wood, so if you just prop up your hand, it makes it a whole lot easier to handle. Alrighty. I'm just kind of jumping around here a little bit, trying to make sure that I stay in a good position for my hand. Absolutely, Barbara. Yep, another great reason to become a member on our paid platform. Not only do you get all kinds of great goodies and benefits there, fantastic community, and discounts on all the other patterns over at Wood Burning University. You get the project patterns for free based on your tier level, and yeah, it's just uber fantastic. And it helps support me so that I can do these free live streams on YouTube. That way I can get information out to the most people possible and still be able to, pay for the cost of living. So we all have to make ends meet here and there, and I really appreciate everybody's support. Thank you. Okay, we are getting there. I think I gotta scoot a little bit. Oh, Mina, yep, you have a great list there. You get the live stream access to all of our past live streams based on your tier level. So if you're at the beginner level, you get all the past beginner live streams. If you're at the intermediate level, you get both beginner and intermediate. Advanced, you get beginner, intermediate, advanced, and premium, you get everything there. Because sometimes we do some really more advanced live streams and projects, and so that gives you the full everything on our platform. And then you also get discounts. So if you're the beginner, you get was it 10%, Mina? I think it's 10, 15, 20, and 25%. So the beginner level, you get 10% discount on the patterns over on Wood Burning University. And if you go full premium, you get 25% discount on all the patterns over at Wood Burning University. So that's a really cool thing. Alrighty, let's put in some little chompers here for a pumpkin. Jack-o'-lantern. Okay, thanks, Mina. Yeah, 10% for beginners. And then it goes up from there because there's 4 tiers. Okay. Next, let's put in some leaves. Also kind of thin lined, kind of dainty. Our main focus point here, focal point, is our owl and pumpkin. Oh, Tara, you just did your yearly membership today. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's support and hanging in there with me over all these years and all the ups and downs and crazy things that have happened over the years. I really, really appreciate everybody's support. Thank you. So you can see sometimes I'm pushing the point, sometimes I'm pulling the point down. You can kind of get a feel for what you prefer. Some people like, all I do is pull the point down. Other people just push the point forward. I think it's a good idea to practice both techniques. It winds up saving you a little bit of time from turning the wood all the, constantly. But you want to just lightly skate the point on top of the wood. If you really press down hard, that point can go everywhere, every which way. So nice light pressure. Let the tool and the heat do the work. You don't have to press really hard. And I learned that the hard way and immediately ruined some points and completely bent them. Because when these brass points are hot, they can bend quite easily. Awesome, Mina. Thanks for that. Yeah, she says if you have any questions, contact us at woodburningu, the letter U, @gmail.com. Mina is a whiz with the whole new platform with Mighty Networks, and she's fantastic with helping everybody get settled into where you need to be. So, alrighty. So all we've done so far is just line work, but we've varied our lines from thick to thin. Next up, I think I'm going to zoom in on those eyes, and we'll break those down and make those all fun and kind of simplified. So let's get in here where you can see those eyes. And I'll move that reference photo over for you too in just a minute. There we are. Okay. So I think I'm gonna try to do a spot focus here for everybody so that I don't lose, so it doesn't get blurry. So I'm going to continue using this mini flow point. And we'll start with the centers of the eyes. We want to try to make these as round as we possibly can. Sometimes that takes a little bit of holding your breath, sticking your tongue out the right way, and just being really slow and patient. You might have to adjust it a little bit afterwards, but we'll do the best we can. For like creating a more precise circle, I don't usually do the eyes in one complete motion like I did everything else. I'll usually try to make them in smaller, whoa, that got crazy, sections here. This one seems more oval than the other one. So I'll see if I can't kind of widen here and there to fix that. Next, we're going to burn around our highlights. You want to make sure that you put your highlights in nice and big and chunky, maybe a little bit bigger than you think they need to be. Because as we fill in the dark areas, you'll notice that those highlights kind of shrink a little bit. So nice wide border around those highlights. We have kind of a little smiley face down here. And then we're going to block in the center of the eyes. And you'll be amazed at how those highlights just trim right down. Okay. All right, so bear with me here. He's looking kind of crazy, but trust the process. And heck, you know, Mina, maybe I should have started with the eyes first. They're in their ugly duckling stage now. And that's one of the biggest, I think, like the most top kept secret ever with artists is if the eyes don't work out, you just make them into sunglasses and you just paint on or burn on some sunglasses for the little fella. And he'll be a cool little owl and you'll never know that the eyes didn't turn out right. So always keep that in the back of your mind when you're doing wood burnings of eyes. If they don't turn out, just burn on some sunglasses, they'll be fine. Whew. Holding breath. I'm glad I didn't make this piece any smaller. Right, next we have kind of this darker little border underneath here. Thanks, Mina. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, don't just throw away a project, you know, if it doesn't work out like you hope. There is so much to be learned to push past, like the point where you perceive failure. I've been there so many times and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? Nothing's working out. And you just try to kind of pivot or implement a new plan. There's been times where I've had a wood burning that turned out so unlike I had envisioned it to that I wound up going over with acrylic paint, and it was like a wood burning of an elk. And it was in kind of a weird position and it just didn't look right. And I struggled and struggled with it. And finally I just brought out the acrylic paint and started painting in bushes around it, covered up the area that I didn't like, and it turned out just fine. It sold, everything was fine. And I really liked it. But just don't give up or quit when you meet resistance, because that's the time that we really learn to improvise and adapt and overcome. And if I had just quit on so many pieces, I wouldn't have learned half as what I have, trying to fix problems with new techniques. And I get mixed media and it's all fun. I need to quit talking while I do these eyes. And if your lines kind of aren't quite even, just go back over them again. Take a step back, see where they might be kind of wavery or wobbly, like right here looks a little bit uneven. And you just go back and you make minute adjustments. You kind of push in areas. You can't take away areas, so just kind of make small adjustments to make it look more even. All right, so he's kind of like wide-eyed and crazy because we need to put those little angry scowl on the owl like they have. Michelle says, if I only knew that before, could have saved me a lot of stress, although all my portraits would have sunglasses. But you know what? Maybe that could be your thing and your style. It could be really fun. And you do such a great job. Lisa says, this is why I do not even have a desire to attempt portraits. Portraits are tough, yep. Night Owl says, a lot can be learned from mistakes. Mistakes are not always completely a bad thing. I agree. What was it? Bob Ross that talked about happy little mistakes. He's absolutely right. All right, so next we're going to put on our little angry owl scowl because they all seem to be kind of grumpy. I don't know why, but owls tend to look grumpy. Okay. Just trying to see where else I want to go. We can put in some of these little, I like to call them just little fluff tufts here. These little tiny feathers. A lot of these are upside down V shapes. Didn't work out very well. And we'll try to fix it later. Okay. Let's see. I want to maybe kind of fill in a couple of these dark areas around Mr. Owl. Yes, Lisa and Brian. Happy little accidents. Yep. Vivian. Hi, Vivian. When you get stuck with a piece, you put it away for a while. That is such great advice. I love that. Then when you look at it with fresh eyes, you're still stuck. So you put it away again until you're not so attached to it. That does make a good plan as well. Night Owl says scowl of an owl because he's always misunderstood. That could be very well. Hi, Amy. You learned that your biggest problem is not sanding your wood enough. Yes, that does make a big difference indeed. I agree. Sand that wood. Okay, I'm going to kind of block in some of these darker areas here. Kind of still using a back and forth motion in here to imitate feathers. What I don't want to do is just come in and burn this way. I try to keep my burn marks more like in a natural setting, I guess. So with eyes, I want curved lines. With feathers, I want kind of jaggedy lines like this. And I can clean this up and make that look a little bit better here in a minute. Okay. So, let's see. I think my flow point is cooled down. It has. So another tip for beginners, whenever you change out points, always make sure that your burner is off and cold. So if you try to change out these points when the burner is hot, it's easy to damage the threads on the point and inside of the burner itself. You can completely ruin a burner that way and the points. So because heat makes everything swell, you're trying to take out points that are too tight and then you put in a cold one. It's just a big no-no. So make sure it's completely off and cold. Don't just grab the point with your fingers and try to get that out of there, because sometimes you'll forget whether you turned it off or not, and you don't want to burn your fingers. So as a rule, always try to use your needle nose pliers here and unscrew that. So I'm just turning the housing until this guy comes out. Set that over in your non-flammable tray, wherever that is. I have a little glass dish, and then I get my next point, which is my little tiny baby pro point that I made. I put that in there and we screw it back in. Whenever you replace points, I always advise using the needle nose pliers because you can't get your fingers to tighten it quite enough, and then they sometimes wiggle and they get loose. So if you take them when they're cold and just give them a nice gentle tightening, then they should stay put and they're not gonna wiggle and rock, because I've had that happen a lot as well. All right, so now we have our new point in. We're going to turn that on, and we'll be back to that in about 5 minutes. Oof. He does have a cute little mustache there, doesn't he, Kendall? Alrighty. Okay. So next up, I'm going to switch over to the shading point. You'll notice that it has a much softer kind of a feel to it. Okay, I think I'm gonna change up and go work on the pumpkin here for a little bit. And we'll put in those lines. So the first part of tonight's live stream is just different line work. And you'll see how it gives everything just a really well-balanced feel. If you did everything with a single point, whether it's small, medium, or large, it's going to look a little bit less dynamic than it could be. Just vary your line thickness and a little bit of darkness as well, and you get a whole new creation. I think I forgot part of the pumpkin back here. I need a little bump. Okay. Alrighty. So you'll see that this point has just a little bit of a softer element to it. This is great for areas where you don't really want a harsh line. You just want more of a defining area. Alrighty, I'm going to turn the wood because that line is just going to really be a bit of a challenge for me as a right-handed person. And that is totally fine. I highly advise turn the wood to make burning an area as easy as possible. You don't have to keep it in one direction. I highly advise that you don't keep it in one direction. Little one down there. Okay. We'll make it to where you can see the picture a bit better. Next, we can put in some of our vein structure in our leaves. Once again, just using a very light pressure. Okay. And then we can put in some of the more dainty areas of the owl's chest. And I definitely want to tie that into the lines that are already there. kind of forgot some lines in here. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit, but just already you can see that we definitely have a more dynamic wood burning by simply changing up the variety of our lines. Thicker, thinner, softer is a good way to go with that. Okay, let's see, next up we'll put in a little bit more of the details on that noggin and around the eyes, and I'll clear that up in just a moment. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and outline the last of our guidelines here lightly. And just kind of go around these areas. Again, we want to kind of outline these a little bit bigger than we think we should. And we can get more of that scowl in there. And then he also has this really faint line that goes just on the outside of his eye. Okay. Alrighty, so let's take a step back really quick. Terry was in Hobby Lobby, and they still have 2 of the Versatile kits left for $25 a piece. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, if you're looking for an inexpensive wood burning tool that's one of the best right now, Walnut Hollow, if you can find one, their tools are just great. Very, very great. Okay, so if you're a brand new beginner and all you want to, really focus on is your line work, this is a great place to kind of stop. At this point, you can leave it as is. You can burn, if you want to practice a black background, that would work well with this. Just go on around and practice your black background. You can also add color to this piece. If you want to do colored pencil, acrylic, if you do acrylic paint, make sure that you do it in thin, watered down washes. You don't want to apply a bunch of water to a piece of wood. It can warp and crack and break and all those things. So stick with the drier types of art. If you really want to go with a wetter type of artwork, media like acrylic paint with washes or watercolors even, you'll want to pre-treat the wood and just use a clear gesso for that one. And treat the wood when your burning is completely done. You cannot go back and burn over your anything that's been treated. So once you've made that decision to treat your wood, you're done burning. You cannot go back and burn over the top of it. Obviously you can. I highly advise that you don't. You have your own free will, but you don't want to be burning over toxic things. So unfinished wood only is what you want to burn on. Yeah. So you can kind of play with this and take it into different stages. At this point, June, you could do color with resin. That would be fun too. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to the shading point, and we're going to start adding a little touch of shading here and there. So if you're new to wood burning and you're not quite sure, okay, well, I've done my line work, I want something else. What do I do? So now we're just gonna kind of lead you along to the next stage. And of course, Mina, I am definitely going to start with these eyes because they are screaming for some shading. His eyes look like really kind of bug-eyed and very unnatural at this point. So what we're going to do is take the shading point and we're going to start up here and just burn a simple gradient downward. You can see that it's much darker up in here and then it fades out. And that's all shading is a gradient from light to dark or dark to light. Vivian says water can raise the grain, so you might want to sand it again as part of your pre-treatment. That is a great idea as well. Yeah, so let's just jump right in here. If you want to add color to these eyes, shade it less, burn it less than you think you should. Because if you try to add pigment like colored pencil or anything like that over a burned area, the color doesn't stick to the wood very well. It just kind of won't sink into those wood fibers. So the less shading that you do in an area that you want to add color, the better. If you're not going to do color, then go for the full shading. But the wood burning tool compresses those wood fibers at the top and basically seals them off, and you can't get pigment to hold on to the wood. So just something to consider if you do want to add color later. Okay, so super simple for eyes. I love wood burning eyes. We're going to start at the top here and just come down a little bit. Darker at the top and a little bit of a gradient downward. And then you can go back over and adjust it and push those values a little bit darker in the shadows. That'll give that owl a nice little scowl. And just bring that darkness down. Kind of like that. Now you can see on the eyes, well, we'll jump over and we'll do the other one and then we'll take it from there. So same thing, we have dark towards the top. We're kind of in the recesses of that scowl. My burner is on full heat right now, so I'm just blowing on the point to drop that temperature a little bit to give me some more control in that area. Then we're going to go back over and just pull that burnt gradient downward. Excuse me, like that. Now, if you look at the highlights, there's generally kind of a really bright highlight and then there's one that's not so intense. So the one that's brighter is going to be up towards the top in this case, and the other one is going to be a little softer. So we just want to add a touch of shading on that lower highlight. And then we get more of our nice glassy kind of appearance to our eyes. And once we build some shading around them, they'll look even better. But you can also go back over, and if your darks aren't dark enough, you can kind of clean those up a little bit too. Really make sure that the center of those eyes are just as dark as you can get them. And leave some touches of highlights, put in a gradient, and you are golden. So try not to overcomplicate eyes. Try to simplify them into more basic kind of thought chunks. Let's see. Brian says, any advice for those of you that have wire tip burners like the Optima one for shading? Okay, so I've not used an Optima before, but we'll just flip this over. And I have a razor tip system here. So let me move these carefully. And we'll take a look at playing around with some wire tip burners. And I can, like, are you specifically asking for like eyes or just shading in general? Kind of, what are you thinking? Let me take a look at my razor tip. Oh, it is plugged in. Okay, good. So one of the big things that I struggle with wire tip burners is regulating that temperature. Seems like I'm fiddling with the temperature dial more and more, and just kind of trying to figure that out. So let me jump around to some of the points that you can easily get. This is I do believe it's a medium knife shader. So you'll notice with these, and I think the Coalwood has very similar pieces, you can see that it's razor thin. And I find that to be a negative when shading, because this little thing, and it's not plugged in here, so I'm going to touch it, the point. Something super thin like that is going to be really hard to regulate that heat. There's going to be super, super hot or not hot enough. So you're going to kind of scorch, like overcook, undercook, kind of a challenge that you're going to deal with. So if you can get a point that has a little bit more mass to it, that would be good. Here is a spoon shader, which is nice. It's still a lot thinner than like the Versatool and the shading point that I use, but this one I would say is better. And then I get, those are some older type of pens because they don't have the white chunky thing at the top there. So I got these ones about 10 years ago, maybe more. And these are some of the newer ones that I've gotten in the recent years. So this was a spoon shader. Not a spoon shader, a round shader. This was a medium round shader. But I like to have kind of a point to work with because I'm used to the Versatool and the shading point. So I sanded the sides of this to make it from a round spoon to more of a beveled edge. And I really prefer that. Here's another older style pen. It's like the baby brother of this guy here. And again, I just sanded the edges to make it go from a spoon more to like a spear type point. So having said that, try to find a point that has a little bit more mass to it if you can. I'm going to kind of play around with this. We'll plug it in. And I always like to have a scrap piece of wood handy when working with the razor tip or any wire tip burner. The razor tip is what I have, because I'm always tinkering with the controls and the heat, trying to get it just right. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on, and I'm going to start with like a level 6, and it heats up almost instantaneously. Let's see, Lisa had a question. The piece of wood, this is also basswood that I'm working on tonight. It had live edges, but it was such a weird, wonky shaped. It was like much bigger, and it was weird. And I've had it for forever, and I didn't know what to wood burn on it, so I had my husband cut off the edges. So this is also basswood. Okay, so Brian says you have a razor tip too, shading in general. Okay. Michelle says you use a spoon shader for most of your shading on the razor tip. Okay, cool. So we're at a level 6 with the round shader. Okay, and see, so that's immediately to me a little bit too dark. But if you move it more quickly, then you can kind of regulate that. So I think a lot of times when it comes to whatever type of tool that you're using, it comes down to how much time you spend with it and kind of practice. But I know that that's pretty light, and if I come back over, the temperature is going to change quite a bit. So moving that point quicker is going to help. You can blow on the point with this as well. Shading, I usually do kind of a back and forth motion, like an airplane is coming in for a landing, goes along the runway, and then lifts back up into the air. So every time, land, take off, and then opposite, land, take off, and then that helps prevent that when you set down, travel, and lift. So those are stop spots. Try to always keep your point in motion. Another good thing is lower your temperature with a wire tip. It might take you a little bit longer to get your shading, but it will be much smoother if you lower that temperature. Another thing that's great for shading, let me switch to a favorite of many people is the spoon shader. Plug that in and we'll set it like a level 7. I find that the chunkier the point, the higher the temperature that you'll need. And now this backside of the wood has not been sanded, so it's going to be a little bit more uneven. So I don't have to move this one near as fast at a level 7 because it has a little more mass to it. One thing that I love with shading is think of shading in direction like this and layers. So the first pass, I'm going to go this way. The next pass, the next layer, I'm going to go slightly offset like this. And I'm exaggerating with my strokes really wide so you can see the technique. But normally it would be like this. Keep your strokes nice and tight together. And I like to do kind of an offset 45. Kind of like that. And then I'll go back for my next layer and I'll slightly offset it this way. And it kind of acts like ripples in an ocean, and the waves kind of cancel each other out. Then you can come back over and pick a slightly different angle. Think about where I'm at here. Slightly different angle in here. And the more that you just kind of gently offset your angles, the smoother shading you will get. This is an exaggeration, but keep those strokes nice and tight together and continue to alter your direction slightly. And then you're not going to see those strokes as much in your shading. I hope that makes sense. That's if you're using something that has a smaller footprint like this. If you choose something that has a larger footprint, like, let's say, this one here, I believe, shoot, I know it's in my book. I don't use the razor tip very often. I think it's a knife shader. Don't quote me on that one. So at a level 7, this one should have a much bigger platform, but because it's so thin, it's gonna be, I find it to be a little bit harder to handle, but you can cover a bigger distance with it, which is handy. But I would still kind of alternate your directions slightly. I don't want a crosshatch, but just tiny variations. I hope that makes sense, Brian. You're saying the scorch mark when you first put it down is your biggest issue. Okay, so if that scorch mark is really giving you problems right there like that, and then you start like, oh my gosh, that was too much, and then the more you burn, it's like, see, there's no more heat in there. And then you lift it and you set it back down and it over scorches again. That is my biggest challenge with a wire tip burner. If you use a solid point burner, your heat is a little bit more regulated. But if you don't have one and you're sticking with the wire tip burner, turn your temperature down and you're gonna have to be more patient. So I'm down to like a level 5. And then when you set that point on the wood, it should be more manageable. So lower that temperature and then kind of start really taking your time and building up those gradients in layers. And then you can go back over and, okay, I want to darken up this edge a little bit. And you're just going to have to really take your time. Okay. Cool beans. All right, well, I hope that that gives you a little bit of a nutshell to think about with a wire tip system. If you do a lot of dark line work and all that, the wire tip burners can be a huge time saver because they have the power. You can burn on bone, you can do all kinds of other stuff that is more difficult with a solid point burner. But for soft and subtle shading, I really love a solid point burner. You can still do the same with wire tip burner. You just gotta be patient. more patient than you would think sometimes. So I don't know. No. I bumped that. Okay, so let's dive into this face area here, and I'm going to think about what I want to do. Let's kind of soften this a little bit with that shading point. I can see some of the strokes in there, and it's driving me a little bit batty. Okay. So I think I'm going to jump over to the Pro Point. Now this does not come with anything yet because this is my own little creation. I took a shading point and I just sanded it down to make it smaller. The benefit of that is it holds the heat even better, and you can get consistent, nice darker lines, and it just speeds up everything. So as we've talked about in the past, I've been trying to get other places to manufacture this point, and everything's been falling through, so I haven't had the time to build them myself, but that is my grand plan, is to hand make these and get them available for use. Unless somebody knows of a manufacturing plant and a financial partner. I'll have to do them individually here. Okay, so I'm focused mostly on the darks next. I'm not going to kind of overwhelm you with shading every little nuance. I like to think about shading in chunks. So we just did our line work. Now we're going to block in some of the darkest values in the project and kind of build off of that. So just looking at Mr. Owl, we have his little under fluff there kind of darkened in. He's also going to have some shadows kind of where the wings fold under, and I might go a little off script from the reference photo because I like to do that off and on. You're welcome, Brian. Thanks, Barbara. Yep. I am really wanting to get those Pro Points out. All right, so next we're going to focus on some of the darkest areas of the project. Think about areas that are in shadow or maybe kind of tucked away or hidden, folded under a wing, and that sort of thing. So in my books, I have the shading scale broke down into 5 steps. So at this point, we're working on level 5, which is going to be your darkest values that you can get. And then we'll kind of stair step from there. So if you don't have those books, definitely take a look at them. I have one specific for realistic wildlife. I have another one that is more beginner friendly with just all kinds of different projects and patterns. Kind of gives you a taste of mixed media and other options that you can do. And those are available both on Wood Burning University and Minisa Pyrography. So I'm just putting some shadows underneath. Imagine that these feathers are overlapping the ones underneath. So that's where I want to kind of concentrate my shadows. Underneath, underneath, underneath. And sometimes feathers can be a little bit like overwhelming. How do I even break this down into a picture? And I can't even quite understand what I'm seeing, let alone how can I recreate it as an artist. So if you take some time and you really study the subject and try to analyze where the lights, where the darks are, and break it down. And so sometimes I tell myself over and over again, okay, under the feathers, under the feathers. And that helps me so I don't get quite so lost, which is easy to do when working with feathers. And under these, under those. And then I think I kind of like the whole area of the undercarriage of the bird to be a little bit darker. Another great thing to remember when you're trying to deal with perspective, things that are closer, things that are farther away, remember that darks are going to push away from the viewer and look farther away, whereas lights are going to pull forward and appear closer. Okay, so we have some shadows under there. I think Mr. Owl is looking pretty good for his level 5 darks. So let's go down to the pumpkin and put those in. And yeah, we have 45 more minutes. We should be able to complete this in the time that we have. Generally, your like stage 5 of shading is going to take you longer than, you know, stage 2. So hang in there. We're going to get through some of the darker values, and then we'll go to darker midtones, and we'll have all kinds of fun with that. All right, we have quite the dark area on the top of the pumpkin stem. We can put in some more structure here as well. Okay. Next darkest areas are going to be kind of in the upper corners of your carving. And so in this case, I'm setting down and sliding, setting and sliding. And if I need to zoom in on that, I can. So I'm not going to do the back and forth motion. I just want to set and slide, set, slide. And that gives me an immediate nice gradient right there. And I can do the same thing from the bottom. And same thing over here in this corner. Flip upward. Let's see. Then we have some darker areas in these corners here as well. Thank you, Mina, for putting those links in to my sites. All right, next we're going to come over onto this side. Do a touch of shading there. And there. So you can see that I'm putting the shading mostly in the corners and leaving kind of some of the middle area a little bit lighter. That helps to draw the eye in and give it a little bit more of light to work with. Where are we going next? Same thing up here. We'll start at the top, kind of flick downward. We're going to keep our shadows mostly in the back of the mouth here. And I'm going to scoot. And you guys let me know. If I'm not zoomed in enough, please let me know. And I can readjust the camera. Okay. So let's see. I think I want to start putting in some of the shading on the pumpkin. So we're going to start, I'm going to start probably down here at the bottom, and we're going to start sweeping upward. Lisa, you're sitting there blowing on the screen at the pen. Yeah, that's, oh gosh, yep, that's easy to do. I think I will zoom in on that pumpkin a little bit more so you guys can see better. I don't have a very big screen. I have like half a screen that I'm looking at, so hopefully you guys' screens are bigger than mine. Okay. Once again, let's take a look and just analyze what we have here. Our pumpkin is going to be darker at the bottom and a little bit at the top because the owl is shading it. We're also going to have darker areas in the creases of each of the pumpkin because darks push back, lights pull forward. So the closest parts of the pumpkin are going to be the lightest. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to shade in those nooks and crannies. Those mountains and hills need to be lighter. And we'll just kind of jump in here and start on that. So we'll start down here at the bottom, and I'll just do some sweeping shading upward. I might hit these creases here just again to darken those up too. Now this is where the fun really happens for me, is when we start building up these midtones. I love midtones, especially dark midtones. I think that's really where the power and the life comes from with a wood burning, is those darker midtones. They're just gorgeous. Go up and over that talon. And remember, dark at the top, dark at the bottom. We're going to keep that little section there a little bit lighter if we can. Okay, that's a good base layer. Hi, Vicky. Glad that it's looking good on the big screen. Good, good, good. All right, so that's layer number 1 of shading. Next, I'm going to go back over. I'm going to go a little slower and try to build up those darks a bit more. And a bit more at the top as well. Like we've talked about in the past, to make things look rounded, you want shading at the bottom, shading at the top, or from side to side, and lighter in the middle, and that'll really make it look poofy and rounded. So I'm going to drag in a little bit more dark on the edge of our pumpkin. And then kind of blend it just a little in the middle. And so I'm continually offsetting my strokes just a little bit to kind of smooth out that stroke pattern, because this point does not have a very big surface area. So I have to blend, blend, blend. And we can also put some shading underneath the talons and whatnot here, but we'll do that in a bit. Okay, so let's push these darks into the crevices a little more. And then blend that slightly to make it look more natural. Okay. So there's one section kind of started. Let's move on to the next one. We have quite a bit of shading up in here. Still think that this crease needs to be a touch darker. Okay, moving on, we want it nice and dark at the top. And along the side as well. I'm going to kind of come down over here. So that tapping is each time I land and take off and land and take off. And we're going to really pull the darkness up from the bottom of the pumpkin. If you have a lot of light areas to burn, turn the burner down or you're going to pass out. So a lot of times I just try to make quick adjustments on the fly, but by breathing on it. Oh, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I love shading. It's just so peaceful and enjoyable, and I really love it. So slight offset to wash out those shading marks. We need to be darker on this side. And kind of blend it to the middle. Now I'm moving pretty fast here so you can still see those stroke patterns, but that's okay for right now. We're also going to shade a bit more down in here, so I might switch over to the shading point to do some of this lighter work, but that'll be fine. So I don't hyperventilate here. I think I need to make the inside of the mouth a bit darker. And that's something that I find time and time again. When you start shading a project, you think, okay, you know, I have my darks dark enough. And then you put in other values around it, and it's like, wow, no, it's not dark enough at all. And so I wind up going back and readjusting my values here and there, and usually pushing my darks darker to get that level of just depth and pop that you can get by having a slew of dark midtones in there. So we'll just make those a bit darker. Okay. I'm gonna probably stick with the bottom area here with this point. I'm gonna make this crease and this one here a little darker too. And blend them together because we don't want just lines in the crevices of our pumpkins. They need to kind of have shading on either side. Okay, let's keep working on the dark areas first. Because I'm really wanting to get this finished up here in the last 30 minutes. Push those crevasses a little bit more. So does anybody have any questions as we're working on this? I will probably turn the wood here in a minute so that I can get that outer edge just a little bit easier. Thanks for being here, Laura. I hope you have a great night as well. So I'm just going to really try to start blocking in some of our darker areas, and then I can shade them and blend them out with the other point here in just a minute. Our refrigerator sounds like it's dying or has a gremlin in it. Do you hear that?
Yes.
It's going crazy. Sounds like it has an upset stomach. All right, we're getting our initial kind of crevices and shading there. Alright, pulling those darks up from the bottom. So I got into that leaf a little bit. I'll fix that later. Alright, let's... Oh, no. I want to do this really quick. Just kind of soften that a little. Alright, flip it around. Barbara, your fridge started making noises like that. It was a bad fan. Oh, okay, cool. That's really good to know. We had our lovely favorite chipmunk hunter, Chipper, brought in a chipmunk and let it go, and it wound up getting underneath the refrigerator and then into the back of the refrigerator. Oh my goodness. So fortunately, my husband was home and he says, well, I've been meaning to clean out underneath the fridge anyway, so we did a huge evac of the kitchen, and we built this big structure to funnel the chipmunk back out through the door. And anyway, it wound up working. We got the chipmunk out of the inside of the back of the fridge, and he went running out. He had no choice but to go out the little maze that we made, and he went out the door. So then we had dust bunnies and all kinds of stuff underneath the refrigerator. It was crazy. So it's been recently cleaned, but that's good to know if it might be a fan. Terry says maybe the fridge was talking with our garbage can. Yes. On some of those first live streams that we did, we had the craziest garbage can. Well, we still have it. And you'd open the lid, and then when it would close, it would make this horrible sound. And so we called it Mona, the moaning trash can. And sometimes it pops back up and it makes that crazy sound, but not always. It kind of varies. Yeah, Mona the trash can. That was fun. All right, it doesn't really show it on my reference photo, but I do want to make this outer edge of the pumpkin shaded a bit more just to make it look nice and plump, because shading on the outer edges will make things look more rounded. Alrighty, let's see, we have more up here. Oh, Lisa, your fridge did that same noise and you had to replace it. Oh boy, okay. Well, we will be mindful of that. Alrighty. So I think I'm going to have to turn this sideways to get those last little things. And then I'll just kind of buff it out really quick with the shading point. Because I'm rapidly... Oh, your trash can. Okay, gotcha. Not your fridge. That's good to know. Vivian, your fridge got possessed twice this year after the guy left with $400 You looked at the thing and told it one more thing and it's going to the curb. Ah, good, good. Yeah, sometimes you have to threaten those appliances and then they might behave. We have, you know, an off-grid solar system, and my uncle helped set it up, and he's like the doctor for anything that goes wrong with the system. And our panels were misbehaving and they weren't doing stuff right, and it was the funniest thing because every time that he would show up to look at it, they would work just fine. So all we had to do is call my uncle and magically our solar panels would behave. So they are well trained. Okay, so moving a little bit fast here to try to get finished up on time. But as you can see, I have just the base structure of the shading in place. So next I'm going to go back with the shading point. It just is a little bit lower temperature, smoother point, and we are going to blend this all together. You can do this with any of your points that you like. I'm more comfortable with this one and I can work a little bit faster since we kind of did our beginner based live stream, and then now this is our bonus session of venturing into some shading. So I'm going to go a little bit quick here and try to get everything together and blended. It's not going to be perfectly blended, but hopefully this will give you guys an idea of how you can just add some shading here and there and make it look more kind of three-dimensional. But this is where I also say that the lighter values tend to go much more quickly. So if it seems like, oh my goodness, this piece is taking forever, well, if you're just focused on those darks, it will take a while to get those darks established. Once you get those in place, the lighter midtones generally come together quite quickly. So don't lose heart, just stay with it. Come on, cord. Barbara says vehicles like to play jokes like that. Yeah, no, they never misbehave when you're in the shop with a mechanic. Absolutely. When there's no witnesses other than you, it's going to do all kinds of crazy things. Hi, Larry. I was thinking about you earlier tonight. Thinking Larry's not here yet. But I know you've got plenty to do on your own, too. So glad to have you here. We're just kind of puttering around here. We did our kind of baseline work. We adjusted our lines. We started with chunky lines, and then we did mid thickness lines, and then lighter lines. And now we're adding just a touch of shading here and there. And I'm kind of in a race to get this done in 20 minutes. All right, let's bring some of this shading down. We have a little there and wrapped up and around there. Kind of down in between the teeth here and there. And then we'll just do kind of a soft blending in the mid-range. Whoop! As long as I don't run over an animal with my chair. Scoot, 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 scoot. Okay, so there's kind of a basic pumpkin tutorial there as far as make sure that you have shading at the top, shading at the bottom, shading on the outer edges to give it that nice, plump, rounded aspect. Keep the light in the middle. That'll make it protrude forward and otherwise look more three-dimensional. Next we're gonna go add just a shadow to these talons right here. Not too crazy difficult there. And we'll do some shading under the toes. Blend those upward. And maybe, I don't know if they have ankles, but I'm saying the owls have ankles, so we're gonna shade the ankle of the owl. Under the toes. And I omitted that toe because it just looks weird. Another ankle. And belly shadows. All right, so let's see here. I bet I have time to do these leaves. We'll take care of the leaves and then we'll finish Mr. Owl. I hope. Thanks, Lisa. I'm hurrying. I spent a little bit too much time doing other stuff, but that's okay. In fact, I think I'll switch over. Nah, that's fine. We'll just shade this really quick. And then if I have time, I'll want to make sure that the pumpkin is grounded. The leaves are grounded, so that'll just entail a little shadow underneath. This live stream might go over a little bit our normal scheduled time, but let's see what I can do really quick. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mina. Thanks, Lisa. The wall that heals. Oh, Larry, you're going to volunteer at the wall that heals. That is really cool. I don't know that I've heard about that. Next week. Cool. To give those a little bit more dynamic aspect, we can add some shading as the leaves kind of tuck underneath the pumpkin. That'll make those look a little bit better. You can even make it look rounded by shading a little bit on the edges and in the center. And so that part there would be a little bit higher. Same thing, we'll add a little bit more shadows on this outer edge of the leaf. And then maybe right in this crease area here too. Okay, so those don't look quite so flat. This needs a little bit more here though. Better. Okay. So just kind of remember to create form, shading at those edges, you know, around the pumpkin, at the bottom of the pumpkin, around the leaves. But you want to try to keep in mind a light source. So a little bit darker on one side, not the other one, and kind of blend that in there. Okay. Those feet are a little bit light, but let's move up to Mr. Owl. Okay. I think I might do the same thing that I did with the pumpkin. We'll take the Pro Point, block in some of the darkest stuff, and then we'll blend it in with the other tool. So let's start by doing a little bit of patchy shading here and there. I want to kind of mimic the illusion of feathers, so I'm not going to do super smooth shading like I did down on the pumpkin. I want to vary it a little more. And think of patches. Because owls have lots and lots of patches. We have a kind of a little crease under his chin, where his little neck fold is. Patchy shading with the occasional stop spot. That it happens a lot, but we can go back and kind of blend that out. Keep in mind also that his little owl belly is going to mimic the same effect of the pumpkin. We're going to have darker shading at the bottom of his belly and the top of his chest. The lightest area is going to be right here, and it's going to make that owl look nice and poofy in the middle. If you overshade his light belly, he'll look too flat. So just simple shading tricks like that are huge. Whether you do cross-hatching or stippling or whatever, just try to think about the illusion of a three-dimensional object and how to kind of go about that. We have shading under this wing. And I think we need a little more shading underneath his tummy. Oh wow, Larry, that's amazing. Larry is saying the snout of a grizzly bear is lighter in color than the rest of the face. Yes. I would say anytime that you have a protruding nose on an animal, it's going to be lighter than the backside. Just like with the owl, I'm kind of in the way there, but the very front of that beak is going to be lighter, and as it recedes back in the crevices here, it's going to get darker. So yes, the snout of the grizzly bear will be lighter. Generally, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rules, but yes. A lot of times when people try to do wood burnings of like a dog or a wolf, anything with a snout, if they over darken the snout in relationship to like the cheeks and the face, it will make the nose look kind of flattened, and it'll be difficult to achieve that level of realism if that's what you're going for. Alrighty, we're gonna, I don't know what, I've got something leaving crumbs everywhere and I don't know what it is. So I'm gonna quickly throw in a little bit more of the shading here on these ear tufts. And again, the top of his head needs to be darker at the top. Sometimes you don't always see that on the reference photo, but I do believe that that is the key to making a more three-dimensional subject, is push those edges with shading, and that will make them look so much more rounded. Generally, if you have any subject that looks flat, you're missing some key element of shading. You just need usually to push your darks more. If you like to burn really dark, then you might not leave enough lights. So, 10 minutes. Oh, you're welcome, Larry. Okay, so I'm going to try to just do some more patchwork underneath here, mimicking some feather light patches. Bobby, kitty. And they have kind of some stripy tails. So I'm just really throwing in some quick mimicry of feathers. Definitely, you don't need to rush. I'm rushing just because I really wanted to finish this up tonight. But feathers can be very abstract and a lot of fun. Try not to let them intimidate you. Just go for it and really look for patterns, lights versus darks, and see what you can kind of create. I have a lot of zigzaggy areas here as well. Next, to create that rounded shoulder, we're going to shade on our edges, and that's going to blend outward, or sorry, inward. Same thing, I want a little bit more shading on the outer edge of the owl and kind of blend it in a little bit. Okay, we're getting there on Mr. Owl. Okay, we're going to push a little bit more darks kind of underneath this area of the wing and along this shoulder. I do want to kind of go in and soften my, these are almost like really quick sketches here with the shading tool. And I can soften them a little bit later. I can add more detail if I want. Okay. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, those eyes they're looking pretty good so far. All right, here's another thing that I love with owl eyes is to shade right near the eye and kind of make it go outward. And they have that beautiful little scowl. And then I'm going to pull this edge in just a little bit as well. And you can leave more stroke marks here to imitate feather chunks. And then that will help those eyes to become kind of sunken in and recessed, but we still have that nice little highlight right in there so that it still has a nice bit of depth. It doesn't look quite so flat. Again, rounded critters, shade the outer edges. And blend that. Blend, blend, blend. A lot of blending, a lot of smoothing. And layers are going to be your friend. Okay, so here's a great example of lights pulling forward, darks pushing back. We want the closest part of that beak to be the highlight. So we're going to kind of burn a parenthesis shape around the beak, leave the center nice and bright. You can blend that a little bit more and then push the area around the beak nice and dark. That'll make that area push back. And then a lot of times they have kind of a blended shadow underneath their little whisker things here. They're feathers, but you know what I mean. We can deepen the scowl a bit more. But look at the difference with the eyes, guys. Even though we had our eyes shaded pretty well, without kind of sinking it into its environment, it's gonna look flat. So by just adding a touch of shading, it really makes that eye so dynamic. Darks push back, lights pull forward, and voila, we have a little owl. So same thing, I'm going to come in here, and I want to make these lines kind of radiate outwards like sun rays. So I'm going to try to get in the best position that I can for that. If you need to turn the wood that would be very helpful. And then same thing, I'm going to radiate these ones inward just a little bit. And really push the roundedness of our critter. I think we need some lateral feathers there. And then we can kind of soften this area out a little bit too. Just a touch of shading to kind of blend it together. Whew. Okay, well, guys, I think that I am actually close to finishing this one. Sorry I had to kind of rush a little bit. I didn't think that this would take quite as long, but it was a little bit bigger than I had originally planned. It was either going to be really like this size or half this size, so depending on the type of wood that I had. Those feet look a little bit too stark, so I'm just going to put a touch of shading on those. And then you can always add a little shadow under these claws. Those are always fun. A little bit darker underneath. So the owl kind of is more part of the, you know, tied into the pumpkin. And, oh, I forgot to do a little blending on this arm. Terry, your favorite thing to draw, burn, and paint are eyes and animal eyes. Yep, I agree. Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Mina. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, I kind of rushed this one, and I could fiddle around with this for probably another hour or two, just for fun. But I think that we kind of get the overall idea for the project. Definitely pull the shading down under each of those feather, like where the feathers overlap. Okay, well, I think that we're about there. I'll zoom out here in just a minute, and I'll probably go ahead and put in some shadows underneath, because right now we have a floating pumpkin, and I don't really like floating subjects very well. So we'll tie that pumpkin down to the ground, and then we'll be pretty darn close. As always, there's always tinkering, but yep. So as far as the schedule goes, I'll be here this Friday. Yeah, I'll be here this Friday, and we'll continue working on Mr. Squirrel. That's a fun one. It's coming right along. And yeah, that's the plan. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at woodburningu, the letter U, at gmail.com if you have any questions. And I really appreciate everybody being here tonight. I hope that you had fun. This is a very cute project. It's very seasonal right now. So if you want to make one of these yourself, it's available over on either Mighty Networks with a paid platform tier, paid membership, or it's available on Wood Burning University a la carte if you'd like. So we're just going to ground this a little bit, kind of add some shadows underneath so it's not floating, and then we can soften that and kind of spread it a little bit like this. If I can get into the right position. A little bit of heavy line work in there, but that's okay. It gives it kind of an interesting appearance. Okay, now we no longer have a floating pumpkin. It is grounded. Alrighty, guys. Thanks again for being here tonight. Hey, 8:01, looking pretty good on time. So, okay. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. And please reach out if you have any questions. And we will see you next week, or next Friday. All right. Thanks a bunch, guys. Bye.